A state of emergency is due to end in Central African Republic, but armed groups are stepping up their attacks, forcing thousands of people to escape. Why is the army and its international backers struggling to contain the violence? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Halla Mohieddeen. A state of emergency in Central African Republic appears to have done little to stop armed groups. President Faustin-Archange Touadera imposed it in January when rebels, angry at his re-election, attacked towns and villages. The measure is due to expire this month, but the United Nations says the fighting has intensified. Dozens have been killed in attacks on villages in the past 6 months. The army has the support of 12,000 UN peacekeepers, Rwandan special forces and Russian paramilitaries. They've managed to recapture territory from the rebels, but the fighting has forced more than 200,000 refugees to escape, mostly to Democratic Republic of Congo. On Thursday, the UN Security Council extended an arms embargo for another year.
Soyons clairs, c'est un embargo.
Let us be clear. This is an embargo which aims to prevent armed groups from acquiring an arsenal and using it against civilians, Central African Armed Forces or UN peacekeepers. At the same time, the possibilities of exemptions are extended so that the authorities of the Central African Republic can continue to train and equip their army. I stress that the embargo does not, of course, prevent the Central African Republic from acquiring the means to defend itself.
Well, Central African Republic has been mired in violence during the past decades. The removal of President François Bozizé in 2013 led to years of fighting between Christian and Muslim armed groups. There were hopes for peace when Faustin-Archange Touadera won the election in 2016, but he has struggled to contain the fighting. The government and 14 rebel groups signed an agreement in 2019, but it didn't make much difference, forcing officials to declare a state of emergency in January. Well, the UN warns the security situation is deteriorating and says nearly 2 million people may die without assistance. Well, let's bring in our guests. Moussa Abdoulaye joins us on the line from Garoua-Boulé in Cameroon. That's on the border with Central African Republic. He's a journalist and political analyst there. In the Canadian township of the archipelago, Ontario, Mudge, Central Africa Director at Human Rights Watch. And joining us from Brussels is Peter Knoope, a fellow at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. A warm welcome to all of you, but I will start with Moussa Abdoulaye, if I can. You work in the Central African Republic, you live there. Just give us a sense of what it's like right now. You have this state of emergency, which is due to be lifted, but the situation doesn't seem to be improving. For people in the country, what does this all mean?
So, thank you very much for having me on the program. I think the state of emergency is supposed to end yesterday, but we haven't had any statement from the government so far. We don't know yet. I try to find information if they extended or not. I think in terms of a security situation, it have an impact on having more control for the government. To control the movement of the rebels, because they used to move during nighttime and rest during the day. So it helped the government to actually persecute different houses and make some arrests. But many people are very concerned because we have so many arrests and disappearance of many people in the country by the National Army or with the Russian. We have this report by different bodies like the UN, UN and CNN and different organizations have reported that there is so many violations of human rights using, this state of emergency.
Do you
so
think
we think that the situation is very bad?
I quite imagine. Do you think the state of emergency has helped at all, or is it just another stopgap measure that's merely prolonging the difficulties that the Central African Republic is going through?
It has helped, like I said, somehow the government to, stop the movement of the rebellions during the nighttime in different locations, especially in the capital city. Because in different cities that I travel, actually, the state of emergency and the curfew is not even, active. It doesn't work. Like, people don't even care about it. They go to their activities during the nighttime, even at the curfew. But it really helped the government to over-control some areas, stop the movement of the rebellions within the capital. But I don't believe that it had helped in any way in other locations. Contrarily, it has a terrible negative impact in the population. So many people are, crying about this, what's going on. So many arrests. People are getting arrested because of, a state of emergency, and there is no justice. So many disappearance of so many people, and we don't know where do they go, and people can get arrested with any justification, and it happened a lot. So people are suffering. Yeah, it has really negative impact on the population.
Okay, let me turn to you, Lewis Mudge from Human Rights Watch. We're hearing distressing testimony there from Moussa Abdoulaye, who is travelling around CAR, and he's saying that the state of emergency is allowing some control to come back to the government in some small measure, but it's also having horrible impacts on large chunks of the population. What's your assessment of this state of emergency? I mean, is it sustainable?
I think we would broadly agree with Moussa. The fact is that any improvements under the state of emergency in the last 6 months have been, in your words, stopgaps. What we're much more concerned with is what Moussa's alluding to, is the rise in human rights abuses attached to the state of emergency. And most notably, that is the door-to-door searches in Bangui, and what we are documenting as a very worrying trend towards targeting ethnic Baya up north of the capital of Bangui, and the cooperation of Russian paramilitaries in these operations. What's worrying for us at Human Rights Watch is that these type of operations can serve as a pretext to further fuel recruitment for rebel groups all across the country. When they know that the government is going to be engaging these types of human rights abuses, it really does just serve as a recruiting tool, and it's terribly worrying for us. And frankly, it's a real step back. These alleged human rights abuses, which have been documented by the UN, are a real step back for the Touadera government, and they should really change course and focus on a security program and a security strategy that does put respect for basic human rights up front.
Why do you think this isn't the case then? Why do you think the government, Lewis Mudge, is taking this approach?
They, frankly, in December, I think all of us were shocked at how much territory the latest iteration of a rebellion coalition called the CPC, we were shocked at how much territory they took and how quickly they took it. And the government, and this was happening under the auspices of a very large UN peacekeeping operation, and under the auspices of international support from both the Rwandans and the Russians. So they felt drastic measures needed to be taken. Those drastic measures had to cut the movement of the CPC. To some degree, that worked. But they were also trying to find CPC fighters who had notably infiltrated Bangui, the capital. And they were going to arrest those fighters under the state of emergency. The military was able to make arrests without having to go in front of a prosecutor, without having to go in front of a judge. Due process was kind of thrown out the window for emergency measures. And what we're documenting and this has been substantiated by the UN, which has already published on this, is that many of these individuals were actually taken off and executed. And that is only going to further drive recruitment of people who feel disenfranchised, people who are associated with the former Seleka groups, but also with ethnic Baya, who are from Bozize's ethnic group, who feel targeted, who feel like they've been lumped in with the CPC.
Okay. Peter Knoope, is this an assessment that you would agree with, that the state of emergency that's being brought in could be helping to fuel recruitment drives for the rebel groups that the government is trying to get a handle on?
Yes. Human rights violations, often have that impact, and securitization has that effect. So my assessment is that could have that effect. But I think it's important to also look at the bigger picture. What happened, the Bangui Forum 2015 and then the peace agreement of 2019 stipulated that there would be elections. And the elections generally invite tensions because people take a high profile. People want to, compare one another, so they need to take a higher profile to guarantee visibility. That's exactly what happened. And then Bozize came back to the country and managed to get some of these armed groups away, cut them out of the peace agreement, and managed to raise rebellion under his leadership to oppose the situation that was part of the peace agreement. So 4, 5, 6 of the groups stood out of the peace agreement, distanced themselves, and started to fight a government that was in place. That's what happened. This is what has happened in December. That led to the state of emergency. And then the Russians and the Rwandans came to the help of the government and started to fight the rebellion. That's the bigger picture. Now the strategy of the Russians is to get the rebels out of the cities in Central African Republic. So they're chasing the rebels from the cities outside into the rural areas, into the villages, and the villages are suffering. The villages suffer the impact of the rebels coming into the villages and taking whatever they want to take. So the situation is improving in some of the cities, but it's deteriorating in the rural areas with a huge humanitarian impact. That's what is happening today, and it's part of what the election dynamics did to the peace agreement.
Okay, well, you mentioned there the Russians, the Rwandans. We do understand there are foreign actors who are in the country and who are taking part in this conflict. But let's get down to the brass tacks, really, for people who are not as familiar with the Central African Republic as you three gentlemen are. You mentioned there, Peter Knoope, that rebel groups were being siphoned away from this peace agreement in order to rally round the former leader, Bozize. Why would they do that? Yes. Why would they do that? Why are they rallying beside Bozize and not going with the leader who the country had elected initially?
Because they knew very well that nobody was going to vote for them. They were part of a peace agreement that was that was as old as that was a year old. But in the elections, they wouldn't stand a chance. So they would never go back to the political spectrum after the elections. So it was either losing elections or losing their position in the elections or opposing the government that was in place. And Bozize managed to mobilize the fears of not coming back to the political spectrum in some of these, some of the rebel factions. Spoilers, this is a peace agreement that is is very unstable in its initial phases. Okay. There's always spoilers in peace agreements. So these are the spoilers, and Bozizé managed to mobilize the spoilers. So, that's exactly what happened.
So if you take a simplistic view of this and say, well, how do you fix this problem? Is fixing the problem getting rid of the troublesome actor here, which we're implying would be Bozizé? Or does it go deeper than that? I can see you, Louis Mudge, shaking your head slightly. I understand it's more complex than that. But just to boil it down to viewers who are not as familiar with this dynamic, what would you say to that?
Sure. I mean, I think yes, Bozizé is a spoiler. I absolutely agree. To boil it down to a simple dynamic, it would be this. To date, 8 years into really horrific violence in a country that is not foreign to violence, the number one driver, in our opinion, of this violence is impunity. No one to date has actually been held accountable. None of the big fish have been held accountable for the war crimes and the crimes against humanity that they've committed. Whether that be François Bozizé, who absolutely has committed crimes as president and now has gone on to play the spoiler role, completely breaking up the Khartoum peace agreement, or whether that be the myriad of other rebel leaders across the country. We do have 3 individuals currently in The Hague in front of the ICC, and there's a special hybrid court called the Special Criminal Court, which has gotten up and running with international and national judges and prosecutors. But I reiterate, to date, Central Africans are exhausted. There's this humanitarian aspect that Peter alluded to, which is absolutely, in our opinion, should be put at the fore. But people are exhausted in seeing these warlords continue to just get away with murder, and no one is held accountable. And they want justice. They've asked for justice. Okay. The Central African people do want there to be a degree of accountability. Okay,
Moussa, Abdoulaye, is that something that tallies with what you're hearing when you're reporting in the country? People are exhausted, and where do they see this, the solution to this, the end game to this? Does it come back to this peace agreements, or do they want to see some actual accountability for the crimes that are being waged against them?
Yes, so I think that the situation is really complex, and most of the population of Central Africa today are very, very confused about the future, about what can be the solution, because we have signed so many agreements between the government. We have witnessed, so many different agreements and peace accords between the government and the rebels, but it never worked. It never worked out. So what can make it today work? In one hand, this is in one hand. In the other hand, people are thinking, how can we fight with the rebels, with 14 different armed groups, while our army is under embargo? And the UN peacekeepers are there for about 7 or 8 years now, and it has never changed anything. So people are very confused, actually, but we believe that there is no any other solution than the dialogue, because we don't have army to fight these guys, actually. Mm-hmm. And the Russian military who join us also are unable so far to control the whole territory. What they did is just like what my fellow said, the guest said, that they just kicked the rebels out of the city while they are over there in the rural areas. And even yesterday, they have attacked some city, one big city very close to the border with Cameroon, which is called Man, inside the Central African Republic. And they kill few soldiers, they kidnap a few soldiers, and they are controlling that city up to date, up to now, as we speak.
And how do people view the
situation? It's very confusing.
It's incredibly confusing, and adding to the confusion are, of course, these external parties who are coming in. We understand there are Russian contractors. The Russian government says they are contractors who are in to provide training. Rwanda has sent in armed forces. Also, France has a relationship in the area. Chad is sending in troops. Do you think that these external forces are helping or hindering the situation on the ground?
So they are actually helping at some point that like we say, just kicking out the rebels out of the cities. But we are seeing what I'm saying now is that when they withdraw, like when they kick out the rebels out of one city, the next day they leave some national army without weapons, without guns, like 10 FACA military, our national army called FACA. They leave just like a 10 individual, securing that city. But the next day the rebels come and kick them out and take back the city. When the Russians left, for example, and the Rwanda, they can overtake a control of one city, and the next day the rebels come and take it back from the national army. So today we can never, depend, for example, on the Rwandan or the Russian, because how long they are going to stay there? 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? I don't know. Okay. What we need is that we need first to have a peace agreement, and then we have a national army who are strong and independent, who can keep the security, even if when those guys left, like the Russian or the Rwandan, when they left today, they can take back control of all the territory, and if they leave tomorrow, who are going to keep the security?
Okay. Peter, yes.
You see my point.
Yes, it's a very complex situation. It seems like almost a game of whack-a-mole. When you manage to solve one issue, it pops up somewhere else. Peter Knoope, I saw you nodding in agreement with what Moussa Abdoulaye was saying to us. Moving forward, what are the strategies then to deal with this? Because chasing rebels out and having them pop up somewhere else, you could do this for infinity.
I was in Bangui yesterday. I came back from Bangui yesterday. There's roughly two opinions in Bangui, and they're mutually exclusive. Some people claim that renegotiating the peace agreement, the Khartoum peace agreement, the 2019 peace agreement is the way forward. So bring these people back to the negotiation table, discuss, debate, exactly what Moussa was saying. But there's another portion of Bangui, the political class there, that says no, they've lost their position, they've lost their rights to the table, to the political dynamics. So we're going to chase them and kill them and find them and hunt them out, as they say. So there's two different positions: dialogue or not dialogue. And my personal opinion is that I think the only way out, just as Moussa says, is go back to the negotiation table and try to renegotiate the peace agreement and revive that. And then all the elements, SSR, DDR, demobilization, disarmament, and exactly what my colleague from Canada says, there's a need for justice. There's a need for peace and reconciliation in the most classical sense of the word. We need to transform the conflict into a peaceful situation, and justice is what the people want, and justice is what the people need, and a reconciliation mechanism is the way forward. Okay, we have 1 minute left. People are at the heart of this. Are you optimistic that there will be an end to this for the people of the CAR, Lewis Mudge?
I'm afraid I'm not as optimistic as I was in 2016. I'm afraid that looking at the numbers, looking at hunger levels right now, the food insecurity and the displacement, I'm terribly afraid that this country, which has already been through so much, has many more years of difficulty on the horizon. That's just my realist perspective, having been working in and on it for 10 years.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And the final word to you, Moussa Abdoulaye. How do you see this playing out? Are you hopeful for the future of the CAR?
Yes, my wish is to see that the dialogue really accelerated, and that is include everybody, including the armed groups and the political opposition side, and also the justice. We really need a special court that was created recently to be active and very quickly, so that we can, see the future. But otherwise, with the fight, we don't see. We don't expect to have a peace in a very few years.
Okay, I'm afraid we are out of time, but I do appreciate all three of you for joining us on the show today. Thank you very much to Moussa, Abdoulaye, Mudge and Peter Knoope. And thank you too for watching. Remember, you can catch this show again and all of our previous programmes anytime by visiting the website. That's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can head to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Halla Mohieddeen, and the entire team here in Doha, is bye for now.